Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. We are on part 2 of recreating Disney princesses to see how they might have looked in real life, as well as talk about when and where their stories take place. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Here on Mortal Faces, I take portraits and transform them to see how individuals we read about might have looked in real life. So let's get started. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more historical recreations. And let me know in the comments who you'd like to see in real life. Number 1. Jasmine. The movie's composers Howard Ashman and Alan Menken had originally decided Aladdin would be set in Baghdad, Iraq, but they were forced to change that. The Gulf War happened. Roy Disney said, "This can't be Baghdad," so I took letters and did a jumbled anagram and came up with Agrabah. Watching Aladdin, it seems that Agrabah has more influences, particularly in South Asia and the Middle East. When the narrator opens the film, he says, "Welcome to Agrabah, city of mystery, of enchantment, and the finest merchandise this side of the River Jordan." Multiple characters mention Allah in the movie, and it's a place where the caravan camels roam, perhaps making a reference to the Silk Road, which ran from China through India, through Arabia, all the way up to Greece. Agrabah's architecture was inspired by Islamic buildings, which encompasses elements of Arabic, Persian, and Islamic architecture. The city's royal palace appears to be directly inspired by the Taj Mahal in Agra, India. So Agra plus Baghdad perhaps equals Agrabah, or the main city of Agra also has a neighboring city called Ba. More references to India include elephant sculptures and Jasmine's pet tiger named Raja. However, the background scenes are said to have been based on Persian miniatures, as well as photos of the Iranian city of Estevan, taken by the film's layout provider Razul Azadani, an Iranian animator for Disney who was also named the captain of the guards. The time. There's no specific time, however a good guess would be during the time of Hana Diab. He was a storyteller from the Ottoman Empire in the 17th century, which ruled from east of Baghdad all the way to Algeria. He went to France and kind of planted the seed there for the Aladdin story. The Sultan at the time could have been inspired by the sultans who ruled over the empire, and with the large turbans from many portraits of these sultans, we can easily see where the inspiration for Aladdin's turbans came from. Aladdin wears salwar pants, which are roomy pants that are narrow at the ends to allow airflow and freedom of movement. His hat is called a fez, which was a popular headwear in the Ottoman Empire, especially later in the 1800s. It became a sleek modern headwear in comparison to the elaborate turbans. Jasmine wears similar salwar pants and shoes called babouche, and when she went into town, she wore a brown abaya with a matching hijab, which was correct to cover your head in public. Inside, her hijab was no longer needed, and the only missing piece would be an outer dress. The tube top was a Western idea of the Middle East. This idea might have been inspired by traditional Indian wear or the sari. Number 2. Esmeralda, from the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And it's pretty clear this one takes place in Paris, France. The book by Victor Hugo takes place in 1482. The exact date is mentioned directly in the lyrics of Topsy Turvy, which states, "Scurvy knaves are extra scurvy on the 6th of January, all because it's Topsy-Turvy Day." So our story is set in Notre Dame in Paris, France on the 6th of January, 1482. The film opens on this day, and there are about 2 to 3 nighttime scenes when Quasi and Esmeralda discuss their palms, go looking for Esmeralda, and are at the Battle of Notre Dame, which is uncertain if the battle takes place at night or if the smoke of Paris burning makes it seem like nighttime. So the film ends on either the 8th of January or the 9th in 1482. One last piece to confirm this century is the fashion. During the song God Help the Outcasts, we can see a woman whose hair is in the exact shape of the escoffion, which was the headdress worn, usually with a veil. Beside her, the woman in purple wears a similar but smaller piece. This was popular in the 1400s and ended in the 1500s. And let's not forget Claude Frollo's outfit. Long robes like this were worn by wealthy men in the 1400s, but it's his hat that is interesting. It is similar to the escoffion, but instead of having a veil, it has more of a scarf hanging from it. It developed from the medieval hood which you can see peasants wearing in the film. Fashionable middle and upper class men would reverse it onto their head and bunch it up. This headgear was called a chaperon. It consisted of the borlet, which was the same padded fabric as in the escoffion. However, instead of the woman's veil, the fabric draping from it is the rest of the neck and tail of that medieval hood, which was wrapped around. In other words, it was the men's version of this headdress, and it looks as if Frollo wears it too. Number 3, Frozen. I calculated 2 theories on the dates of Frozen and its sequels in this last princess analysis. The village of Hallstatt, Austria is rumored to be the inspiration for Arendelle, and the rest of the plot is centered around Norway. The kingdom was named after Arendelle, a port in southern Norway. The design, however, came from Bergen, a city in Norway's western fjords. Disney's great-grandfather was also named Arendelle Disney. The landscapes of Arendelle were heavily influenced by Norway's western fjords, in particular Nærfjord. In the fjord, you will find the same waterways, mountains, and steep cliffs that you see in Frozen. For example, Akershus Fortress is the inspiration for Elsa and Anna's castle. It is especially evident with these green-roofed turrets. Disney copy and pasted it all around the castle. The main building of the castle is referenced off of Norway's famous Hedel and Borgen staff churches and other staff churches in general. The specific Borgen staff church was built around 1200. It's all made of wood, and the medieval interior is almost untouched. Staff churches used to be all around northwestern Europe, including England, Germany, and Poland, but mostly in the Scandinavian countries Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. Today, most of them have disappeared, but Norway is the holder of its largest intact collection. Norway, before April, you can head far north to see the aurora borealis light up the sky. Anna's style draws inspiration from traditional Norwegian folkwear known as the bunad. Norway is well known for its mythology that includes trolls. An essential part of this Disney movie, there is a real troll forest in Fløyen. And Bergen, here you can see the architecture which resembles many of the buildings in Arendelle. For the timeline, these specific years are debatable. Some people calculate a couple years before or a couple years after, but generally it takes place in the 1840s. Even without calculations, we can see the style of Anna's dress and the guests' dresses are reminiscent of an 1840s cut. Simply put, the poofy sleeves of the 1830s are gone. It's got some volume, but not as much as the 50s, and it lacks the elliptical shape from the 1860s and 70s. If you want to see my calculations of the exact dates, here is my understanding of it. I could be wrong, there's a lot of different variables involved, that's why I said these specific years are debatable. In the upper left-hand corner of the geographical map shown in Frozen 2, it is suggested by a set of Roman numerals that the year in which Agnar and Iduna's ship sank was 1840. But in Frozen Fever, which came before Frozen 2, the same map pops up that says 1840. Maps actually took a very long time to update, so it's very plausible that when their parents left in 1840, that same map hasn't been updated yet when Frozen and Frozen Fever take place a few years later. So they'd still likely be using the latest 1840s edition in 1843 or 1844 when the stories take place. Oaken's statement in Frozen 1, "A real howler in July, yes?" confirms the story is set in July. Furthermore, after Do You Want to Build a Snowman ends, the movie skips forward and an on-screen text states 3 years have passed. This means that if their parents died in 1840, 3 years later would be 1843, and we know from Oaken it's in July 1843. In Frozen 1, Anna was 18 and Elsa was 21, as confirmed by Disney COO Jennifer Lee. We also know Anna was born on the summer solstice and Elsa on winter solstice. Therefore, Anna's birthday was June 21st, 1825, and Elsa was December 22nd, 1822. I know it's very different from the popular 1821 and 1817, 1818 birth dates. In the short Ola's Frozen Adventure, it is implied that this short would take place in December 1843, or the first year that the castle gates were open again, so about 5 months after the first film. Then the mini-sequel, Frozen Fever, takes place almost a year later since the first film, on Anna's 19th birthday in 1844, so it would be June 1844. Frozen 2, the time period is stated in autumn 3 years after the original. Therefore, Frozen 2 is in autumn 1846. Finally, we learn from Lieutenant Matthias and Yelena that the mist which surrounded the enchanted forest, which was the plot for Frozen 2, lasted for 34 years, 5 months, and 23 days, meaning it began in summer of 1812. I removed some other details that confused this timeline, which would push it into the 1860s and 70s, such as the Little Mermaid Easter egg and the invention of the bicycle chain. So this concludes Theory 1. Here is Theory 2, which is a stretch, but it adds up, even though most of us are comfortable with the 1840 date. Elsa and Anna's dad, King Agnar, was 14 when he unofficially became king, according to Frozen 2. We know the forest was trapped in mist for 34 years, beginning when he was 14 until the end of 34 years, which is marked by Frozen 2. If Agnar had been alive until Frozen 2, he would be 14 plus 34, so 48 years old, but we know he died 6 years before Frozen 2, making him 42. So he lived for another 28 years. Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid, as seen in the flashback, came out in 1837. So if he was reading the book in 1837 at least 14 years old when he met Iduna, then 1837 plus 28 years until his death equals 1865 when he dies. When he died, Elsa and Anna were 15 and 18, and we've established Frozen takes place 3 years later when they are 18 and 21. Therefore, if he died in 1865, plus 3 years later is 1868. If Frozen were to take place in 1868, that would match the earliest chain bicycles, even before the popular safety bicycle came out in the 1880s. So being royal, they could have had access to these earliest prototype technologies. And that's my second theory, which would account for the invention of the bicycle chain. The only thing is the fashion doesn't resemble the 1870s. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more recreations, then consider subscribing to my channel. Each of your subscriptions does help this channel grow, and it allows me to continue making more videos for you. It's the best way to support me. Let me know in the comments who you want to see in real life. I do make a list of all your suggestions, and I will see you in the next one.